Live time, ladies and gentlemen. TruthWire, Truth Time. Friday, hanging on out. I'm your host, Frank Foster George Mula.
And I'm Fiorella. Music is loud.
It is, but it's Friday, fam. Have fun, kick back, relax, and enjoy. Jayme CheeseSlice is on the ones and twos. We want to thank you all for joining us today. All the links down below to help independent media are there, so if you can do that, please do so. A lot of things to talk about. We were kind of doing a little tour going on Nico House's, the WBAI show with Nico House. I was on the Homeless Left with Nico House, so I did double duty with him yesterday. But we had some interesting conversations about Mandami. Fam, I don't know if you heard and you saw one of the comments there. I kind of replied back on the pasta to go thing, and it said it was pretty much unsubstantiated comments that we made that don't do anything. And I kind of pushed back and said, "Well, I don't know about that. You know, you're actually being kind of vague. We were very specific, and we kind of showed a historical reference from his ilk and what they do when they get into the Democratic Party. We see a lot of the same red flags, fam. So I don't know if you want to touch up on Mandami real quickly, but there's still a lot of talk out there about this guy.
I'm sick of talking about him, to be honest. If you by now still think he's going to be legitimate, I mean, I can't help you. I mean, we went over this so many times on so many shows. I even talked about Mamdani with Vanessa, which usually we don't do any electoral policy on that show. But like even that, like it became such a big deal that I even had to address it because it's a foreign policy issue too. We talked about that yesterday on the Controlled Opposition show because it does affect how progressives and leftists don't care about foreign policy. They just care about like something that sounds remotely good, but they don't really want to do anything with it. So, I mean, at this point, it's a moot point because, you know, Mamdani is just a representation of pretty much what the United States is, you know, on the left. That's all you have. That's the only teeth you have to show. And it's all compromised. Nothing else, really.
Yeah, want to send some special love out to Gabrielle Freedom out there. Thank you so much, hanging on out. Of course, Kim Schwari, Kate was sure that Anna Ringwald is there. Old school people. Wow, we love to see you guys there still hanging out. PVSA. Oh, I'm sorry, PV Salvador. I almost spelled it all out. Thank you so much for hanging on out, guys. Everybody else, Wits Higo. I don't know if that's how you say that right, but also hanging out. We want to thank you guys so much, especially the old school people. Fam, we got a heart out. So why don't you get started on this? Because the other day there was some celebration. I mean, this is it reminded me of the celebration when Donald Trump went to get the ceasefire deal. And I don't think Hamas was even there.
Yeah.
They eventually signed on, but they were celebrating. And we were sitting there going, how are they getting like pulling this crap off, and of course you saw a lot of cheerleaders for Donald Trump saying, Biden couldn't get it done. Kamala would have never got it done. Donald Trump got it done. And I'm like, what done? This is Fugazi stuff. That's what this reminded me of the UN, but maybe you can shed some light on what's going on, but it doesn't seem like we've gotten a lot of progress with this whole thing.
Well, no, the progress is for Israel. So that's where the progress is coming from. So let's go ahead and get started and pull this up. The UN Security Council.org story, right? Because this is, you guys have to know the facts first. So the UN Security Council authorized this temporary international force for Gaza, which Donald Trump has called the Gaza Peace Plan. And it's anything but peace. It effectively means the destruction of Gaza to be handled by the United States and Zionist Israel. So they adopted this resolution this past Monday that endorsed a peace plan for Gaza put forth by the United States President Donald Trump and a temporary international force in the enclave following 2 years of war. A temporary international force, which, by the way, would be headed by the Gulf states and Turkey, which are not friends of Palestine in any way, shape, or form. And the Palestinian Authority is governed by Israel. So this resolution 2803 received 13 votes in favor and none against, with permanent members, China and Russia, abstaining. Now, this is what's caused the biggest debacle that I've seen, the biggest disagreement that I've seen on the left in a long time. And not just on the left, but in general, and people involved in politics. And a lot of true colors are really starting to show here as to who the propagandists are for certain ideals and who really actually remotely cares about Gaza and the Palestinian people. So, and that's just my opinion, by the way. The text welcomes this comprehensive plan announced by President Trump on the 29th of December. It's the first phase of a 20-point plan that led to the ceasefire between Hamas and Israel days later, a ceasefire which, by the way, Israel has broken time and time again. They just literally killed people in a refugee camp as this vote was happening, just to remind everybody how effective the UN and any sort of ceasefire has been.
Hamas! Sorry, does that not work anymore?
No, I mean, for most people, I think it doesn't. So this is it. So there's going to be the supposed board of peace. That's what it's called, a board of peace, as a transitional administration in Gaza that's going to basically lead the reconstruction efforts. We know who's going to be behind those reconstruction efforts, Jared Kushner and that dynasty that's going to basically create luxury properties and resorts out of Gaza. So once again, this is what we've been talking about. We knew when, as Pasta mentioned in the beginning of the show, that the ceasefire was not a ceasefire and it was not going to be respected by Israel. We also know that this peace plan is not a peace plan. It is literally the final solution and the expansion of Greater Israel. So anybody that tells you otherwise is high on the highest dosage of hopium or is effectively entirely just trying to lie to themselves and to everybody else, because this is nothing good. And I think most people that I've seen, what I was proud of yesterday, and what day is it? And since Monday, since all of this has happened the last few days, what I was proud of is seeing a lot of followers, a lot of supporters, a lot of people online who have been following myself and other journalists push back against the journalists and the commentators and the analysts trying to justify China and Russia's vote. And I saw that pushback from people who are supportive of others, but said, no, I disagree with you here. I think this was wrong. I think they should have vetoed. And you know why? There's a difference between the people, the public, the masses. They get it. But a lot of people whose money depends on the stances they take on this, or who have a big platform and choose to, somehow justify it in an effort to not lose alliances or not lose spots, whatever the case may be, or if they genuinely are so out of touch that they think this is valid, they have a hard time accepting this, because a lot of people have built their entire personas around cheerleading for China or Russia only, without actually looking at the politics within and what's actually going on. So we're going to break down this whole thing here right now. Pasta, anything to say just right off the bat?
So does China and Russia both have veto powers?
Yes. and they
Okay.
didn't use them.
Yeah. Okay. What does their abstention mean? Is it, I mean, is it just as well as a yes vote? I mean, why didn't, if they weren't going to go along with this, why didn't they just vote no? Instead of using their veto power, could they have just voted no? Or I mean, how does it work?
Well,
is the
what do
no
you mean?
considered a veto?
Yeah. So if
All
they
right.
would have voted yes, they would have voted along with everybody else. If they would have voted no, they would have used their veto power. But they decided to abstain, and they said they didn't agree with what was proposed, but they abstained instead of voting no, and they gave several reasons for that. Well, China did.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean,
I just don't know. Why not? I mean, so the no would be a veto vote. So their abstention is just as good as a yes. It seems like, is this like the ultimate fence sitting?
Yeah, I think, because so what we're getting from, let me just say it right off the bat, what we're getting from China is that they vetoed it, or they didn't veto it, because they were going to follow what the PA wanted, the Palestinian Authority. For those of you that don't know, the Palestinian Authority is the authority in the occupied Palestinian territories, which literally, I am telling you, as someone that was there, they have zero power, jurisdiction for themselves or the Palestinian people. The Palestinian people laugh at them because they have no power. They are controlled by Israel. So to use that as an excuse and say, well, we wanted to support what the Palestinian Authority wanted, is a complete cop-out, because they very well know that the Palestinian Authority has no authority. So that's irrelevant. And they also said the Arab states were also in favor of the peace plan. The Arab states like Saudi Arabia, Qatar, the UAE, that are controlled and vassals of Washington and Israel, they were for of course they were. They stand to gain monetarily from it. You know who wasn't for it? Hamas.
I was
Yemen.
about to ask that. What about the other Hamas and the other resistance?
And the resistance axis are entirely against it. In fact, they reached out, and we're going to go over that. They reached out to the UN Security Council to try to convince them to veto. That's what they did. Okay, so people telling you that, oh, they did this for the sovereignty issue because China and Russia they don't interfere. We'll go over how they do actually quite interfere in other affairs, depending on what's convenient. And if you see me as being angry and you're surprised that I'm going hard at countries and powers that supposedly have been against hegemony, that's because, guys, the truth is the truth no matter what. There's consistency. Pasta calls it balls and strikes, whatever you want to call it. Like, if somebody does something wrong or somebody does something that they shouldn't have, it is worth criticism. Nobody here is saying China and Russia are at fault for what Washington and Israel are doing. Nobody here is saying that they are the equivalent, which is what some people say. You know, some crazy people say that they're worse than the US, that they're exactly the same. I wouldn't go there, but I would say that a lot of the things they are doing are not being talked about, and mostly it's because it doesn't go along the narratives that have been built. So I just want to start off with two people that I thought whose tweets were really good about this story, fam. So Sam Husseini, if you can pull that one up, Jayme.
Consistency, my man.
He said, this UNC resolution on Gaza expected to be voted on today is a criminal imperial farce. I love that. And criminal imperial farce, that's exactly what it is. Seeks to ram the whole Trump plan down everyone's throats in its entirety, even though Hamas said it would require Palestinian consensus. Scroll down, Jayme. Laughably welcomes the Board of Peace, places demands on Palestinians reform, which is effectively defined by the U.S. government, which has done much to deform Palestinian political life, with the U.S. Proxy PA, again, the PA, underscores the importance of aid. It doesn't demand aid, states that aid must be ensured not to go to armed groups, which might sound good, but is beginning to be exploited. Okay, so again, they're talking about Hamas, right? Yeah. They don't want the resistance to get any sort of hold. So it's effectively trying to attack the resistance, which is the only thing that Palestinians can rely on. Vacuous reference to international law, but no mention of the ICJ orders or even the Geneva Conventions, which Israel and the US don't recognize as applying to subhuman Palestinians. Talks about working out privileges and immunities, agreements re the force, brings in the World Bank. puts stabilization force. This is the Abrams Shield plan, by the way, that I've talked about numerous times and on my Substack. It's going to put this stabilization force under the Board of Peace and says that Israel and Egypt, effectively Egypt vassal states, Gaza will be demilitarized, which is essentially no resistance. Not Israel, that has committed genocide. The Palestinians tells other international groups to work with the stabilization force, which reports to Trump, and has legal immunity. Legal immunity, imagine that. Till the end of 2027, with reports over 6 months, like the June 10, 2024 UNSC resolution the US did to sabotage the ICJ orders of early 2024 from the South Africa Genocide Convention case. This is an attempt to kill international law, generally for uniting for peace. Specifically, even if passed, it might fail if people of the world demand real action through uniting for peace. It is not the only possible death of the UN, but also of BRICS, since its members have been so pathetic. So I'm not the only one with this opinion. I'm not the only one that's angry. And it's an anger because I'm recognizing, I'm trying to present a reality of the situation, right? This is a wake-up call, I think, for a lot of people that were under certain impressions. And I've been talking about this for months. We've been leading up to this, okay? This is not surprising to me, but it is kind of seals the deal for me on a lot of things. Anything to say, Fan, before we continue?
No, keep going. I mean, you're answering all the questions that I have. I keep writing down questions, but you keep giving the answers. So you're screwing up. You're making me waste paper over here, you know?
So Craig Mukivar, who is also a UN Security Council member, one of my favorites, along with Nebenzia, who also had something to say about this. And again, I suspect that with Nebenzia, there was something out of his control because he has been one of the most ardent Zionist opposers he is in Russia 100%, but he is also in the UN Security Council. Now, Craig as well, he said the UN Security Council, if unconstrained by international law, is an instrument of repression and injustice. This is what we witnessed yesterday as the council ignored the findings of the ICJ and turned the people of Gaza over to the co-perpetrators of the genocide. They're literally giving Gazans to the people that caused this, guys, and they're calling it a success and peace. The veto has repeatedly been used in the council to violate Palestinian rights. Yesterday, when it could have been used to protect Palestinian rights, it was nowhere to be found. So he's talking about Russia and China. The Security Council has lost all legitimacy. This is a former UN Security Council member. So I just want to highlight that. That's coming from somebody that understands the protocol, the procedures, what it means. It's not an emotional reaction. Like, obviously people have emotions about this because of it's unjust, but when we're talking about this coldly, it is that they're not going along. Russia and China are not going along with the UN Charter. They're not really following what they should have been. They have vetoed other propositions other times. You have to ask yourself why this time they did it. And I'm going to go over the potential causes of that reason.
Yeah. What are they selling? What is the United States selling as far as the success? What are they saying? Is it just one of those things? We're going to get some peace. We're going to get a ceasefire for real. I mean, how are they selling this?
Yeah, well, the Trump administration has been selling this, toasting this. In fact, I will pull up a video in a second. But Jayme, you can go on to the next tweet because this is what Donald Trump is saying, right? And I said that multipolarity is a sham in terms of equity when Russia and China abstained on a UN Security Council resolution in Gaza, failing to use their veto power. They both have, and this is something I'm going to point out, they both have relationships with Israel, okay? And so this effectively handed over Trump to Gaza. So, okay, so I just want to say two things before I read Donald Trump's thing. Gaza being handed over was going to happen regardless of his veto or not, but it would have taken a longer time. It would have not been endorsed legally. Now it's legal before international law. So yes, it mattered. Even if Israel has never paid mind to international law, it did matter because that's an argument that I get from some people. So this is what Donald Trump said. Pasta, do you want to read what Donald Trump said? Because, you know, you're the
congratulations to the world on an incredible vote of the United Nations Security Council just moments ago, acknowledging and endorsing the Board of Peace, which will be chaired by me and include the most powerful and respected leaders throughout the world. This will go down is one of the biggest approvals in the history of the United Nations and will lead to further peace all over the world. And in this moment, a true historic proportion. Thank you to the United Nations and all of the countries of the UN Security Council, China, Russia, France, the United Kingdom, Algeria, Denmark, Greece, Guyana, South Korea, Pakistan, Panama, Sierra Leone, Slovenia, and Somalia. And thank you to all those countries that weren't on this committee, but strongly backed the effort, including Qatar. I love the Qatar people. Egypt, the United Arab Emirates, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, Indonesia, Turkey, and Jordan. The members of the board and many more exciting announcements will be made in the coming weeks.
Okay, so that's how Donald Trump and the U.S. are painting this. They're painting this as a huge victory, a historic success for all of the people in the United States and all of the people in the world, okay? That's how they're painting it. Donald Trump wants to go down in history, understand this, as the peace president. He wants to go down as the guy that brought an end to the war on Gaza, brought about the transitional government, and the last thing, peace in Ukraine. That's what he wants to do. If you don't see the timing of this and the U.S. plan to ensure this goes through, you're going to be very surprised when things are normalized between Russia and the United States. And we have Kirill Dmitriev, Putin's top envoy, working on this as we speak. So again, I've been talking about these normalization desires for months now. One of the few people talking about it. And I have to say that because the majority of people are looking at this the wrong way. Now, let's go ahead and...
I have a question, though. I have to
jump
in. You're mentioning something, the timing of this, right? So when Syria fell and Bashar al-Assad fled to Moscow or Russia, wherever he's hanging out, a lot of us thought that this was kind of like a nod from Russia to go, hey, all right, well, we'll back out of there. You guys just stop what's going on in Ukraine. And we thought it would be an end to Ukraine sooner than later. That really never came to fruition. Is this possibly this veto vote in exchange for ending now the war in Russia-Ukraine?
It didn't come to fruition yet, but what did come to fruition was Russia keeping its bases in Syria, having its bases in Africa, and now returning, which has been confirmed, to Syria to manage the area of its bases, which will allow some Syrians to return. And I've talked about this before, which is better than the Takfiris and the Zionists being there in charge and cutting people's heads off and everything that they've been doing. So yeah, I mean, I think those are the wins for Russia and continued presence in the region. Those are, and again, I will go over all of this. So trust me, like it will become very clear to some of you what's going on.
Sorry if I'm jumping.
But you're absolutely right to bring that up. I think this plan, and we'll talk about that in the next section, is a for sure thing. But I think that the desire from Trump's administration and Putin is there to do something. So here's
I think that would be a bigger win for Trump. Really quickly, I just want to say that I think a lot of people are going to look at this and understand that the Palestinians are still being seriously oppressed. You know what I'm saying? And they're not going to really look at this as a win. But if he does this together, coupled with the fact that they brings peace to Ukraine, that's going to the optics for him. The people over here won't shut up.
Well, the conservatives and
Lionel fam.
The conservatives and the Trump supporters might not shut up, but
that's what I mean.
Who actually see this as selling out Palestine, and it's not just Trump. Of course, he's going to do that, but we're talking about Russia and China. That's what it's going to feel like to a lot of people, the selling out of Palestinians to get some deals, especially when it comes to Russia. So if that does happen, that's going to be the pushback, and this has fractured a lot of anti-imperialists across down the line of, do you actually care about, genocide, or were you just LARPing the whole time? Because that's what it seems like for a lot of people. So I didn't necessarily want to use Drop Site News, but they did post this last tweet And this has been confirmed by Hamas themselves. So Hamas did reach out to China, Russia, and other UNSC members. And the official, Hamas official Osama Hamdan confirmed this in an interview with Al Jazeera. And they said that they had been in direct contact, actually, with China and Russia and most Security Council members as part of this diplomatic push to block the U.S. proposal for this international force in Gaza. And he said Hamas and other factions of the resistance did push out a memorandum warning that this would impose guardianship on Gaza, sideline Palestinian institutions, and fail to protect civilians from renewed Israeli attacks, which is all true. Hamdan added that the outreach also concluded the Arab and Islamic blocs, urging them to block an alternative framework grounded in Palestinian sovereignty and civilian population. And so this is retweeting how China abstained in the U.S. drafted resolution. Before China abstained, they called it deeply worrisome and incomplete. And they could have vetoed it again, but they chose not to veto it. So I just wanted to highlight that there. A lot of people didn't know that Hamas did try to reach out. Now, in the context of all of this, right, there's some things I do have to point out that I think a lot of people don't know about China's dealings with Israel. So just off the bat, Russia has a relationship with Israel. It's cultural. There's Zionists in Israel. There's a lot of Russians with Russian nationality and Israeli nationality. There's 1.3 million Russians living in Tel Aviv. So that's a given. Now, also apart from that, you also have the trade between Russia and Israel when it comes to Russia providing gas and coal to Israel. Okay, that hasn't stopped. Now, China, let's pull this up. China has these backdoor deals that haven't really been talked about by a lot of people. So I'm just going to pull it up right now. So they have these infrastructure deals with Israel. I'm not going to go over this whole article, but you guys should totally look it up. In fact, if we can put it in the chat for people, Jayme, because I think a lot of people don't know this. So I'm just going to read the first part. Despite concern in the West about awarding strategic infrastructure deals to Chinese companies, the private sector in Israel provides a backdoor for them. At a time when the Western world and the U.S. in particular are striving to break away from ties with China in this field of strategic infrastructure, Chinese companies continue to participate in the construction of huge projects critical to the Israeli economy. Dahlia Energy recently signed planning, procurement, and construction agreements with 3 Chinese companies, Czech, Hai, and THCC, for the construction of 2 power plants. The agreements include the construction of Dahlia 2 power plants at the Tafizit site with NIS 3.8 billion budget, and Eshkol Avashol power plant at the Eshkol power plant site with a $3.3 million budget. So this is it. I mean, they have been doing this. And by the way, a process is underway which investments by Chinese companies are examined by the Foreign Investment Review Committee, and they blocked all these investments by Chinese foreign companies, which is what people say, well, China is like blocked. But the Chinese have found a backdoor way to enter these investment deals to deal with private companies with Israel. So that's been going on as well, apart from, of course, the relationship they have with Saudi Arabia that has effectively, undermined and attacked in many ways Yemen. And they are like, Israel does provide the largest amount of trade to China, more than anybody else. And that's not even counting these backdoor deals. So just a lot of people say, well, China doesn't interfere. Well, I mean, they're effectively still engaging. And when Israel is backed by pretty much everybody in the world, except a few countries that have actually broken relations with Israel, it's pretty much continue to be economically aided in one form or another by everybody in the world. So how can people say that that's not interference, right? Oh, it's economy. So are they communists then if they're just engaging in global capital trade economically? Like, is that what a communist ideology would do? Because as far as I know, that's not what a communist ideology would do. It seems like to me that the major ideology here, okay, that they're going with, and not just China, Russia, but Russia's a given. It's a capitalist country. It's not the federation. It's not the Soviet Union, but China still claims to be communist by a lot of people. A lot of the China files that go all over YouTube and say China is communist. Well, I mean, you're showing me right now, they're showing me that they're not, or that whatever they're practicing is something I just don't understand, because it seems to me that their ideology is pragmatic capitalism and trading with anybody who will, grow their interest. And that's fine. We don't necessarily need to blame countries for trying to protect their own interests, but let's call it what it is, instead of applying altruistic motivations for China and Russia, where they actually operate more pragmatically than a lot of people think.
Well, look, the argument is, Pam, that economics are different than military, that they could just, their policy is, we're not going to mix economics with our geopolitics. But that the issue is that the United States is tied at the hip with their economics and their geopolitical politics. Same with Israel. And the point is that China might not have that policy as far as mixing geopolitics with military and economics, or whatever the case may be. But they don't need to do business with Israel if they don't want. They got plenty of business elsewhere. They're not dependent on Israel, and they're not going to be hurt. They're not going to be like, oh my God, we're really sweating because we're not doing business with Israel. You sell goods to the world. You're the number one salespeople. Why do you have this here? It does seem like that all your votes, and when you do push back, is nothing more than virtue signaling. If you're going to walk up to the line and stop, go the full way. Cut them off financially. Go, fuck you. We're not doing business with you. We're out until you stop killing people. Then you're really sincere. To me, this doesn't see. It just seems like a lot of hoopla.
Well, you're absolutely right that they don't have to, but they do. And not only that, I want to point out something that you said. Capitalism is an economic system. It's an economic system. The counter to that was supposed to be communism. If they're saying that they're not mixing the two, it's like, well, the whole basis, when we go to Latin America, they're economically leftist, or they're economically, socialist leaning. That's entirely economical. You can't do that. You can't separate, because the class issue becomes political. And so again, that seems like another cop-out, another talking point by a lot of people. It is an economic system. You're telling me you're engaging, you're part of an economic system, and I get it. Look, in the world right now, it's ruled by global capitalism. So people are going to do what they need to survive. It from a pragmatic sense, I totally get it. Like, what else are you going to do? What do you expect them to do? They have to participate in the economy, because if they don't, they're going to end up like Cuba, or they're going to isolate themselves. North Korea, in many ways, has done that, right? They've completely just isolated and kind of created this barrier around themselves, but they have nuclear weapons, and they have been ardent to be actually probably the closest thing to communist that I would say. But I don't consider China on the same level at all, actually. And I see it now more clearly in the last couple of years that I've been seeing this. And others have been talking about the Saudi-Yemen issue for a long time, like Vanessa. She's been pointing out like the money ties there, which I think is important to also point out. This is not just this time. This has been happening for a long time. The next thing I want to point out is China, who was hesitant to do any sort of deals with Syria, actually met with Giuliani. In fact, Giuliani has just met with Israel, Syria, Russia, and the United States.
And the IMF.
He seems to be a carrier pigeon for the most powerful people in the entire world. I mean, he's more important than Zelensky. Sorry, Zelensky, Zelensky's taking a back seat. He's like the unwanted stepchild. And so you have Giuliani. Now, what happened between Syria and China is that they offered to help send back the Uyghurs, right? Because a lot of the terrorists that were in Syria are actually part of the Uyghur group. And so they made a deal with China to get rid of it. So here on this article, it talks about the restoration of U.S.-Syria relations proves to be an obstacle for China's influence in Eastern Mediterranean, as the new Syrian government is less receptive to China. Nonetheless, though, they were receptive enough. So they talk about that and the Uyghur presence in Syria. And I think it's important that people understand, like, if there are these conversations being had, the U.S. is occupying Syria, Israel, Turkey, Russia, like these conversations are being had, whether you know about them or not. in Syria. So if they're being talked about in Syria, then that means like China is communicating with the U.S. that there are negotiations being made to work this out. And if you look at it pragmatically, is that good when there's diplomacy, when there's efforts? In a way, yes, but in a more nefarious way, what we're seeing is like an advancement of interests in a global race towards, of course, the next phase, which is going to be AI, big tech, all of that. And it does seem like all countries that are powerful enough are engaging in this type of rapid race, which I think is, again, another thing nobody's talking about, like digital IDs, mass surveillance, all of that is actually very much favored in Russia, very much favored in China, of course, and in the United States. So a lot of people are going to be coming to a very, very hard realization of all of that. Now, in Russia, there is opposition to that. Of course there is, just like there is here, just like there is in the UK, just like there is pretty much everywhere else. People are opposing a lot of these things that are happening. And I have to differentiate between, just one element of the Russian government. There are various elements, and I always say this, whether it's Russia, China, there's different, it's not monolithic. There's different points of view. There are different elements. And the people of these countries, they tend to think differently as well. So you can't just, regurgitate what you see on the internet as the only vision that exists in these countries. There's definitely a lot more that's not talked about, because what you see is only pretty much two-sided. The pro-NATO, anti-Russia, or the super, super pro-Russia, like everything is perfect and nothing is wrong. And I'm here to tell you that there is a lot more than meets the eye with that. So let's move on from that.
A shout out to Fred Edward, who's sharing the show, hanging on out. Thank you, Fred, making some amazing points. Fam, you're getting a lot of chatter over there. I like one of the comments. Somebody said, "Pasta, they're selling microwaves, not machine guns or something." 3-chord grifter. He was making some comment. I didn't see who was over there before, but yeah, I get it, and I think that's how they're sleeping at nights, right? They understand there's a relationship go there, so they're going to virtue signal, And I don't know if the virtue signal is just to make the West feel that they can't have carte blanche with everything, but then they seem to always get their way. I mean, they got them to veto. They got them to abstain to their veto power on this. That's crazy.
Yeah. Are you so again, is that opposing hegemony? Because to me, that's not opposing hegemony. And this is what I've been trying to tell people about BRICS and about China and Russia. They don't really care about opposing the United States. They want to be able to trade with them and everybody else. And that's their number one driving force. I'm sorry, guys. They're not they're not resistance-minded people. And Hassan Nasrallah said this himself. So let me go over this so eloquently. And I think this is going to break some people's brains because she put it out there. I don't know how she did this. Logical sequence of events. February 2025, Israel lobbies Trump to allow Russia to maintain bases in Syria. This is verified. I shared the link the other day. This happened before U.S. Congress. Israel lobbied and asked them to allow Russia to maintain their bases in Syria because Israel wanted to push Turkey's influence out. So Israel did that. How did that happen then? Did Israel have a conversation with her? Of course they did. And did the U.S. allow this to happen? I mean, Russia's keeping its bases. So there had to be some sort of conversation, right? It's not like, oh, Russia's going to go after the U.S. They're never going to talk to them. That's not how this works. Pragmatically, they're having conversations. Number 2, multiple meetings in Moscow between Russian officials and the Tekfiri junta in Damascus. Yeah, there have been so many. He was recently there. Russia is not only consolidating existing bases in Syria established under the Assad government, it is now reported to be expanding to points in Hama and Homs, restoring presence in Kamishli in the northeast, and even extending in the south, allegedly to prevent Israeli expansion. That prevention of Israeli expansion, though, is not said by Russia itself. And this is what I want to highlight. Russia doesn't even say these things. It's people who have decided to worship Russia that put these ideologies on Russia that Russia doesn't have. Russia has never said that. Russia blatantly has talked about their relationship with Syria, Jelani's government. They've talked about their relationship with Israel. They don't necessarily highlight it, but they don't hide it. So I just want to point that out. However, the reality is on the 15th of November, Putin called Netanyahu to discuss Gaza, Iran, and the Middle East, according to reports. 17th of November, Russian military delegation visiting Damascus 2 days after Putin and Netanyahu call makes a tour of southern Syrian provinces de facto occupied by Zionist forces, with Israel demanding full demilitarization of the south. The U.S. is also reportedly moving a troop presence to Mazat air base south of Damascus to provide surveillance and intelligence for Israel. The 18th of November, Russia and China abstain, which is in effect a yes vote to allow the Trump genocidal resolution to be passed. Night of 18th of November, the Zionist entity bombs a Palestinian refugee camp in southern Lebanon, massacring civilians and children at the sports center in a densely populated area. 19th of November, Netanyahu enters southern Syria on a triumphant trip to so-called buffer zone, signaling the Zionist intention to remain and expand. The United States and Israel never leave once they're there. Yeah. Okay, the United States, they're not going to leave. They're going to stay there until they're forcibly removed, but they're not going to leave like willingly. So Syria is it's done. It's not governed by Syria. It's if it's governed by Jolani, it's governed because the United States and Israel have allowed it to be done. So that's that. Anything to say on that?
Nope. I just like the fact that when Russia goes, I mean, when the United States goes someplace, they never leave.
Yeah.
They never leave.
So this is an example of what I'm talking about, right? So Megatron posted, Russia officially is returning to Syria. By the way, this was on the 18th, right? So again, pointing out the timeline, just as the UN Security Council vote was happening, then they also publicized that Russia is returning to Syria. Now, this person says they're returning to Syria to protect it from Israel. Russia and Syria have come to an agreement to redeploy Russian peacekeeping troops to the Syrian-Israeli border. Israeli Broadcasting Corporation reports. Okay, so what I said is the reality is
where's the person who said that? Is it down there right below it, Jayme?
Huh?
Fiorella was saying that somebody said they're returning there to protect the Syria from Israel. Where's that at?
It's the Megatron. It's this one. Yeah.
No, where's good?
This is it. This is right. the tweet.
To protect it from Israel? Okay. And all right.
Yeah. So what I'm saying is that they actually return.
My bad. Yeah.
They're returning to Syria because they wanted to keep their bases, okay, and expand their economic interests. That's why they never said that they're returning to Syria to protect the Syrians from Israel. Not once has Russia ever said that. So I don't know where these people get this information other than their own desires, right? That their own narratives that they're pushing. So again, there's no altruism. They had to get Israeli approval to be there. Okay. So if Russia is returning to Syria, who do you think is allowing them to return to Syria? Who has control of Syria right now?
Mostly Israel, United States.
Make the. I mean, guys, it's not that hard. 1 + 1 is 2. Okay. Yeah. Like this is a simple equation here. Like who has control of Syria? Washington and the Zionists. Okay. So if Russia's returning, it's because they're being allowed to. Why would the United States, who supposedly hates Russia and wants to do this? Well, because they have made some sort of negotiation. And I'm not saying the United States wants to be necessarily BFF with Russia in the long run, but I am saying that they're acting pragmatically as well, the same way that Russia is. And so when there are these negotiations happening, that's what's happening, guys. Like, just this is what it is, okay? I'm sorry. And I keep saying I'm sorry because I think some people expected different.
Yeah, they did. Yeah, they did. You
know. So
I just always listen to people talk about Russia a lot. You know, people in the Latin America solidarity movement, and they were always very different than what we thought. Right? Like we thought, we were always believing that, a lot of these ideologues who wear that Che Guevara shirt and whatnot always believed that Russia is the big brother, they're coming to help and defend, and like they were the only ones stepping up. No, they're very pragmatic, and at the end of the day, they won't necessarily be there for them if it doesn't suit their best interest. Syria is just a great example of that. You know what I'm saying? Once again, I think it's also important to point out, fam, because you did kind of mention there are some people out there who want to put the United States and Russia on the same level as far as their imperialism and their actions. That is not true. But the best way to describe this whole situation when it does come to Russia and China is what you said from the get-go. It ain't all roses. They have their own shit that they think doesn't stink, but it stinks too as well.
Well, yeah, and it's not again, we always go back to, well, why don't you criticize the United States? I spent my entire, the last 8 years going after the United States. This is the only reason I'm pointing this out is because they themselves pointed out it's out there. This isn't some like I'm not uncovering anything that Russia hasn't already put out there, that China hasn't already put out there. They just don't necessarily, highlight every single thing, but it's out there. I'm not making anything up. I'm not doing even that much digging, guys. This is literally just out there. Now, this is this Zionist. He's a Democrat, okay, but he's an Israeli Democrat, and this is what he says about the UN Security Council resolution. And I thought it was important that you guys hear it because it's interesting, even coming from this person. He says the UN Security Council resolution on Gaza sets several dangerous precedents in the history of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. It effectively strips Gaza of its political context and places the territory under Trump's exclusive control for 2 years. He will govern through a vague front entity, the so-called Peace Council, whose members he alone will appoint, and which the UNSC has now granted unlimited authority over Gaza. I want to highlight that. People tell me it doesn't matter. It wouldn't have mattered anyway if they vetoed, if they didn't veto, because that's a defense of China and Russia. It clearly would have mattered because if they vetoed, then this wouldn't have happened. They wouldn't have had the votes to get there. And what would have happened is they would have had to backlog, and they would have said, oh, China and Russia are awful. Who cares? They always say this. It doesn't matter. So there had to be a reason for them to do this, and it's not the reason that they're giving. The resolution severs Gaza in the future from rich historical, political, and legal context. It makes no reference to any prior UN or Security Council resolutions, nor to the previous Israeli-Palestinian agreements. It removes the Palestinian Authority from any role in Gaza and entrenches the separation between Gaza and the West Bank. Palestinian Authority doesn't even have an authority anyway. The weak recycled line from Trump's plan about the possible political horizon, referencing Palestinian self-determination and statehood, as a vague, tentative, and distant prospect is empty lip service. It will allow Trump and Netanyahu in the twilight of his government to claim that Palestinians must first become Finns, in Dov Weissglass' old phrase, before they can satisfy any of these supposed conditions. Basically, it would require them to give up every sort of resistance. Arab and Muslim statehoods involved, Egypt, the UAE, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, Pakistan, Indonesia, and the weekend PA, endorsed the text reluctantly, each calculating what concessions it could extract from Trump. Exactly. So they acted pragmatically as well, seeing what they could get from all of this. In the coming days, we'll learn what Saudi Arabia receives from Washington, and later what the others will be paid in exchange for sending forces and or money to Gaza. Russia and China abstained. It will be revealing to learn what Moscow demanded and received in return for not wielding a veto. And there it is, coming from an Israeli. That's the reality. In classic Trump-era fashion, the era of charlatanism and alternative reality, the resolution brazenly declares that the parties have accepted Trump's 20-point plan. This is a blatant falsehood. Neither Hamas nor Netanyahu's government has accepted it. Hamas and other Palestinian factions announced yesterday they will oppose the resolution. Negotiations with Hamas, led once again by the U.S., another unprecedented development, will now intensify in an attempt to disarm the organization. And so, I just wanted to read that, okay? And then he says at the end, the likely scenario for the coming months, Hamas retains control of roughly over half the Strip and deepens its dominance over 2.3 million residents, even while negotiating with the U.S., Qatar, Turkey, Egypt over its future and Gaza's. In parallel, attempts will be made to create an international peace force, define its mandate, and deploy it. The Peace Council and a Palestinian Technocratic Committee will also be established. This is the Abraham Shields plan. Guys, they want to establish a technocratic state in Gaza, which will be governed by the United States and Zionist Israel, a cashless society, if you guys call. That's going to be an example that's going to be followed for everybody else in the world. So here's the phrase, but the phrase standing on chicken legs will likely remain the most accurate description of this fragile, fluid situation. So this is, a Zionist point of view, but still, nevertheless, had interesting things to say.
Well, the main thing to point out there, too, as well, it's like saying that this will be used all over the world. This is their testing ground, ladies and gentlemen. This is what they're doing. They plan to come back and use this on us. Eventually, they're just going to, do what they learn, take from what they learn over there, the highlights, the good, the bad, whatnot, and structure it to bring it back home and eventually do this to everywhere. This is what they want. And that's why they're starting off with a lot of these cities. Gaza is the perfect place for a 15-minute city,
Yeah, it's exactly, and it's going to be the main example. Wow. So now I had a lot of people come at me and come at others who have been, there's been this breakage, right? And of course, a lot of the people that are paid by China and Russia to take trips, especially China, most recently I've seen, are a little bit, saying, no, you're ridiculous. Like Hazal Dean, he said, how are Russia and China supposed to liberate Palestine when all the Arab and Muslim leadership are US puppets? Exactly. So, like, nobody's asking, by the way, China and Russia to save the world. Nobody's asking that. What they are asking them is to do what they legally were supposed to do before. At a moment, it literally doesn't. But they didn't, and I want to know why they didn't. Right? We should know. We should understand why they didn't. So this is what Hands Off Palestine said. Hands Off Tunisia. Aren't Yahya Sinwar, Mohammed Deif, Hassan Nasrallah, and Badreddin al-Houthi leaders good enough for you? Because he's referencing they don't have leaders. There's no leadership. Well, haven't the people of Lebanon, Iraq, and Yemen and Palestine sacrificed enough for you? Haven't the Yemenis and Hezbollah studied Lenin and Mao enough for you? Could not Russia and China veto a resolution of colonization? Could they not embargo the Zionist entity? They could, but they have chosen not to. Does not China sit on a $4 trillion reserve of US dollars? Hasn't it reneged Mao's staunch support for Palestine? Hasn't it grown a comprador export class who is very influential in the CPC? Hasn't it relinquished its duty as a leading nation in proletarian internationalism? Because the other guy Haas is talking about Marxism and saying this is not Marxist if you attack China or Russia. Again, Russia's not Marxist, and China is operating with capitalism. He said, aren't Arab masses under the rule of violent and repressive comprador regimes who fuel on US dollars? Exactly. So how can you even use them? The same kind of regime Bolsheviks had to fight during the Tsarist era, the same kind of regime that imposed on the Chinese a century of humiliation. So he used the same kind of ideology to say, you're not even following your ideology. So that one was for the Marxists, the people who, feel like they can't criticize anything that Russia and China do, even though neither of them are actually operating in that way anymore. So please let go of your ideological blind spots. And that goes for a lot of the Latin American Marxists too, who somehow think that these people are going to come to their rescue.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. It's not looking like that. I would hope I'm wrong. And I would hope that there is some international coalition of actual fighting the hegemony, but that's not what I'm seeing here from these major power players that have the strength to stand on their own. That's really not what I'm seeing, guys.
I mean, I think a lot of people when they start talking about Venezuela, they're thinking that, and hearing different analysts or different people talking about like, how will Russia, back up Venezuela? And some of them, like, not really. Some are like, yeah, they'll do that. And like, I don't think they really will. I mean, they'll provide them with some, maybe surface to air Stinger style missiles to kind of shut down, fire at some helicopters and all that other stuff, but at the end of the day, I don't expect to see Russia come run into Venezuela's aid at all. Like you said, it's all about practicality. You know what I'm saying? And I mean, we do see little moves that kind of are saber rattling and kind of poking back at the United States when the United States is acting up. Taking a aircraft carrier and a submarine and going into Havana. Russia did. But there's nothing else after that. There hasn't been anything going on in Cuba with Russia. You know what I'm saying? Russia has not kind of made Cuba a BRICS member. Still haven't bailed them out. The sanctions are going. No, I'm talking about Cuba.
Yeah, but neither Venezuela or Cuba are members. What does that tell you?
Well, Venezuela got vetoed by Brazil, right?
It wasn't even just Brazil, though, is what I learned.
It was all right. Cool. Yeah. Well, all right. Well, yeah. I mean, it does tell you something that Venezuela is not part of BRICS, and that BRICS hasn't really gone into Cuba and changed it. So it's and they need investment over there in Cuba. They really do. They just need they need an investment in a different way. They need the BRICS currencies, but they haven't been able to do so. And, I don't know why. And maybe it's that whole practicality thing you talk about. I just think it serves their best interest.
Yeah, it's about serving their best interests economically. And, again, like, it's like, can you blame to a degree what that is? No, to a degree. But I mean, you can try more than what they've been trying. And I think
they could have vetoed
there's
that.
Something,
they should have vetoed that.
It's not necessary to continue to work with Israel. The entire world should be completely isolating Israel. But that's not what happens, because apparently Israel has its hands pretty much in the majority of the world, including China, by the way. So let's go ahead and read this. This is a summary that I wanted to highlight from Vanessa, because this talks about some more, I think, logical points here. So, dear everyone trying to do mental somersaults to justify Russia and China's UN abstention that will not only allow Trump free trade zone, Gaza, planned to be implemented, but will now greenlight Zionist aggression against Palestinians. Resistance axis further afield in the region. May I remind you that when you talk about Arab states or Palestinian leadership, it's BS. The PA is not the government of Gaza, nor is it anything other than a lackey of Zionist power. Saudi Arabia was promised F-35s under recommendations from Israel that the deal can go ahead if they normalize. That came out, that Saudi Arabia, that was the thing that Saudi Arabia was promised, as the guy that I just showed you pointed out, that they had been promised something. It doesn't take a genius to figure out that this whole vote was also part of the deal. Putin called Netanyahu on the 15th of November. On the 18th of November, Russian military took tour of southern Syria. Coincidence? The 17th of November, Al-Qaeda foreign minister visits China after visit to White House. And China is suddenly back in the game in Syria, talking about reconstruction, provided the Uyghur Takfiri issue is resolved and the threat removed from China's perspective. So that's what China got, guys. That's what China got, okay? They're getting the deal to get rid of the Uyghurs, okay? So China also now has a foothold back in Syria via the Belt and Road Initiative, which is essentially key to China's expansion and global trade, right? The Belt and Road Initiative that has been painted as this great thing because China builds, right? You can't take that away from them. They build, they're building trains, they're building these transport routes. And again, the corridors are going to be essential to understanding foreign policy from here on out. Mahmoud Abbas will do whatever the Zionist bloc tells him to do. The UAE is an extension of Israel. Palestine has been sold. And last night, amidst Zionist claims of targeting Hamas, 13 civilians were murdered by Zionist strikes on a Palestinian refugee camp. This is a video. In Sudan, southern Lebanon, near the Khalid bin al-Walid Mosque with the camp's perimeter, dozens were reported injured. So that's the video that she showed. She said, P.S. Russia and China also abstained. This is good, you guys. You need to remember, in 2011, which allowed the no-fly zone over Libya, because of the Arab League, okay? So this isn't the first time that they abstained or that they've done this before. What happened to Libya after that? What happened to Libya after that? Now, Russia is also in Libya. They have a base there established. So I just want to highlight that for everybody to know. There is a historical reference. This is not being made up. Okay, Libya was essentially sold out as well. Why was Libya so threatening? We know that they wanted to establish Pan-Africanism. Okay, we know that they wanted to be fully sovereign and independent and use the African resources and the Libyan resources in the region to maintain it all, and that's why they were betrayed. And the Arab League at the time was basically the same thing. The same sort of crutch used by China and Russia to say that they weren't going to, involve themselves in this, that they were going to abstain, essentially. So this is not surprising to people who have seen this before. So yeah, that's that. I want to highlight another thing I said too here. This next tweet, Jayme, if you can bring it up. So I'm not going to read what I said. You guys can go read it yourselves. But one of the things, again, that I want to highlight, though, is this is not a regional problem. Okay, a lot of people are saying this is a regional problem, that the Arabs are the ones that should be dealing with it. This is an Arab problem. First of all, that's extremely, I would say, what's the word, Orientalist, because they are part of the Orient. So it's extremely part of the Orientalists to me to just say it's their problem. It kind of comes off like, Americans always say, oh, they're always at war in the Middle East. They're always killing each other. This is the way they are. This is the way things are in the Middle East. You can't imagine how many times I've heard that from nice people, regular everyday people, when they talk about the Middle East or West Asia. This is how they talk, right? And I can expect it from normies, but what has been troubling is seeing a lot of China files or Russophiles basically say that, like, oh, why don't the Arabs just, defend themselves? It's like, well, the Israelis and the United States have the entire world basically backing them. And the very least, the two powerful nations that talk about how they don't like this, how this is horrible, well, they didn't veto it. So it's kind of like it's actions over words, right? If we're going to say that, if you're going to say that you're against this, then do something about it. I don't care about your words. If I care about word salad, I would vote Democrat, because that's essentially a very liberal position. So that is, you know, what a lot of the China files are doing, right? This is Sunny thing. I mean, he went off, and I liked a lot of what he said before. But if your whole identity revolves around just being pro-China, then you're going to have a problem when China does something wrong and you can't call it out. So he said, if the Arab world ever united for 1 hour, Palestine would be free, but they wait for China, they wait for Russia. And again, the response to this is, we don't wait for them. We literally just simply want them to do what they were supposed to do, a bare minimum. I also want to highlight that Yemen and the Yemen Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Sana'a, they said that this latest resolution is a contravention of Palestinian sovereignty and an unacceptable intrusion into its internal affairs. It disregards the inalienable rights of the Palestinian people, and the foremost among them, the right to end the occupation, determine their own future, establish an independent state. Through this resolution, the United States is attempting to secure objectives that the Israeli entity has been unable to achieve through 2 years of genocide against the Palestinian population. And that's a really good point, because they haven't been able to do it. But now they can legally do it. It's legal now. They have made the unjust entirely legal. Any initiative that sidelines or seeks to dilute Palestinian rights is destined to fail. The resolution once again highlights the Security Council's persistent inability to halt the assault and blockade on Gaza. Despite the grave crimes committed by the occupying Israeli entity, atrocities that stain the conscience of humanity, the Council has remained unable to adopt firm measures compelling Israel to end its aggression. It's been unwilling. It hasn't been unable. It's been unwilling. And they know this, but they're not going to say it, because that's not how the resistance operates. They're not going to go and attack Russia and China. A lot of people are saying, well, why didn't they attack Russia and China if they're so against it? Because that's not how they operate. Because they're not going to beg them for help. They're just going to take care of it themselves. Lift the siege and comply with international humanitarian law. The ministry emphasizes that Arab and Islamic states should have exerted the necessary pressure to ensure that the resolution explicitly reaffirmed Palestinian rights, rather than endorsing positions that weaken the Palestinian stance and pave the way for decisions that undermine Palestinian sovereignty and established rights. The Palestinian cause will remain central to the Arab and Islamic nations. Peace and stability in the region cannot be realized without ending the injustice faced by Palestinian people and ensuring they obtain all their legitimate rights. The Republic of Yemen affirms its principled and unwavering support for the Palestinian people in the pursuit of ending the occupation, aggression, and siege, and in establishing a Palestinian state over all Palestinian national territory, with Jerusalem as its capital. So they're saying they're going to stand by Gaza and the Palestinian people. So yeah. And the last couple things on this section I want to highlight. I think, yes, so we already highlighted the first tweet about the history of this, and Sam Husseini also pointed out this thing again. Quote tweeting Sani Thang, Sam Husseini said China and Russia also failed to veto the resolutions which targeted Iraq, Libya, and Syria. Okay, not just Libya, but Iraq and Syria as well. The U.S. took out every Arab country which could have stood up. So again, these are the responses to those defending the indefensible, in my opinion, which is the veto. So that's pretty much that section. And we can go into the next section now, which is closely tied to it, because as this was happening, the Russia-Ukraine peace plan deal has been thrown out there. Now there's several things going on here. Dmitry Peskov and Maria Zaharba had said that nothing has been concrete, that they don't know the intricacies of this full plan. Meanwhile, other leadership has said that yes, this has been discussed. This is something that's serious. So we're getting two different versions of this, which lends to me that there's somehow something happening, but it's not necessarily set in stone, and they don't necessarily want to reveal what exactly it is. When Russia starts talking like, okay, but this is true, but this isn't, we haven't said this, it's because they want to make sure that their intentions are very clear, and they want to make sure that they say exactly what they intend to mean. Again, because the United States, we say whatever, and it doesn't matter if it's true or not. But when it comes to Russia, they try to stay as close to the letter as to what they want to portray out there. And so that's why you're getting these different reactions. Fam, are you ready to jump back in?
Let's do it. Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, so Politico released this article, and if you can bring that one up, Jayme, it's going to be on archive, which I'm surprised is even working. So there's supposed to be a peace deal this week, as soon as this week is what some were saying. And there's a secret peace deal. It's not really secret, but yeah. And, you know, that's what they talked about on this podcast, that there was this secret deal that was going to happen, and that they were going to have this peace plan between the White House and Moscow. And this was done, of course, via Stephen Witkoff, right, who held 3 days of talks with Russian negotiator Kirill Dmitriev in Miami late last month, and that a 28-point peace plan is not on the table. So we're going to go through this peace plan. And notice they mentioned Kirill Dmitriev. This is a guy I brought to your attention a couple weeks ago that I've been talking about this guy. You guys should all follow what he says, because he's quite revealing in what he says. So Kirill Dmitriev is not in charge of like things that have to go through the Russian administration in terms of like the Duma, in terms of anything that has to go through approval, which is the Duma is like their Congress. He doesn't have this final stamp of approval. He's not the one that's going to approve everything. However, he's the Stephen Witkoff of Putin. Okay, so he's the one that's having these conversations, and he's posting these conversations and a lot of like little hints throughout his X account. And he has been endlessly going on about uniting with the United States. If Putin puts this guy, his image, who he is, front and center, this guy who has relations with McKinsey, who's had relations with the WEF, who worked for Goldman Sachs, Eric Prince, Blackwater, BlackRock, all of these connections. Yeah. It's because that's irrelevant to them. He's going to be the guy that's going to put forth the message of bringing an end to this war and peace. So he's been meeting with Witkoff for a while now. This has been ongoing. So while people say, no, Russia's never going to do that. Okay, we'll see. So let's go over Glenn Deason's tweet, because he tweeted about this, and he said this is allegedly the 28 points of the peace plan, which will end over 11 years of proxy war. Okay, do I believe that this is going to actually end everything? No, I believe any negotiation that Russia does with the United States will be momentary. Okay, it's not going to be permanent.
Yeah. So they'll always want to balkanize Russia, is what you're saying.
Yeah, and I think some people within Russia are dangerous for that. And I care about Russia, which is why I worry about certain people in it. So number one, Ukraine's sovereignty will be confirmed. So Ukraine will be recognized. Okay. So 2, a full and comprehensive non-aggression agreement will be concluded between Russia, Ukraine, and Europe. All the ambiguities of the past 30 years will be considered resolved. Russia is expected not to invade neighboring countries, while NATO will not expand further. A U.S.-mediated dialogue between Russia and NATO will be held to resolve all security issues and create conditions for de-escalation in order to ensure global security and increase opportunities for cooperation and future economic development. This is what Russia wants. Russia wants to have economic expansion. They want things to function as before, but they don't want to give up their territories that they've captured, that they've recaptured, or that have been transferred sovereignly to them, in an effort to do it. They're not going to do that. So Ukraine will receive reliable security guarantees. We've been hearing the same about security guarantees. Whatever that means for Ukraine is whatever Zelensky is going to be told to accept, because Zelensky doesn't have power. The Ukrainian armed forces will be limited to 600,000 personnel. Ukraine agrees to enshrine in its constitution that it will not join NATO, and NATO agrees to include it in its charter, a provision stating that Ukraine will not be admitted in the future. NATO agrees not to station troops in Ukraine. European fighter jets will be stationed in Poland, which is actually quite dangerous for Russia, in my opinion, given the history of Poland. U.S. guarantee. The U.S. will receive compensation for the guarantee. Nice little plan there for the U.S. If Ukraine invades Russia, it will lose the guarantee. If Russia invades Ukraine, in addition to a decisive coordinated military response, all global sanctions will be reinstated, recognition of the new territory, and all benefits of this deal will be revoked. If Ukraine launches a missile at Moscow or St. Petersburg without cause, a security guarantee will be null and void. So this looks, that part looks okay, fair. But if there is a false flag attack that they can frame as Russia invading Ukraine, then they will do that. So, but I think Russians know this. Ukraine has the right to EU membership and will receive short-term preferential access to the European market while this issue is under consideration. So, okay, they have the right to EU membership. They'll have preferential access, but they're not on paper part of NATO. So again, it's still, I think, the NATO thing is it's just irrelevant at this point. A robust global package of measures to rebuild Ukraine, including but not limited to establishing a Ukraine Development Fund to invest in high growth industries, including technology, data centers, and artificial intelligence. Notice the things that they're listing out, everything we've been talking about. The United States will cooperate with Ukraine to jointly restore, develop, modernize, and operate Ukraine's gas infrastructure, including pipelines and storage facilities, which will be convenient for them. Joint efforts to rebuild war-torn areas, to restore, reconstruct, and modernize cities and residential areas, aka making Ukraine one of the smart cities, just like the rest of Europe. Infrastructure development, mining of minerals and natural resources. This is what I've been talking about. This is key to this whole deal. It's going to be key, given Kirill Dmitriev's ambitions for Russia and also the United States. If the World Bank will develop a special financing package to accelerate these efforts. The World Bank. Why would Russia want to be a part of a deal that involves the World Bank if they're so anti the hegemony of the West? Because this is a liberal government in Russia. I mean, conservative socially, but liberal in terms of their economic dealings. They want to restore what was. Russia will be integrated into the global economy. This is what they want. The lifting of sanctions, because they were before. Yeah. The lifting of sanctions will be discussed and agreed upon in stages and on a case-by-case basis. So that's not the priority here, guys. All people actually would love for this to be the priority, but that's not. The United States will enter into a long-term economic cooperation agreement to promote mutual development in energy, natural resources, infrastructure, and artificial intelligence, data centers, Arctic rare earth metal mining projects, and other mutually beneficial corporate opportunities. They will re-enter this with Russia, okay? This is all about what they're going to do with Russia and beyond, of course. Russia will be invited to rejoin the G8. Russia wants to join the G8. So what's the point of BRICS? Oh, but BRICS was never in opposition to the G8, the G7, the G20, right? It's not in opposition. It was never in opposition. It's just an economic bloc. It's just another bloc. Okay, because guess who is also part of it? Brazil, the other countries, so what's the point of BRICS is what I'm asking. Can someone just tell me, then what is the point if they're all just gonna normalize? I mean, it's good, right? Nobody's gonna get bombed but what's going to happen? What does that mean? Normalization. The era of normalization is here, and this is what I've been talking about. So frozen funds will be used as follows. $100 billion of frozen Russian assets will be invested in U.S.-led reconstruction and investment efforts in Ukraine. The United States will receive 50%. That's nice. Of the profits from this venture. Europe will contribute $100 billion to increase the volume of investment available for Ukraine's reconstruction. I mean, Europe is just, they're nothing to this deal. I mean, they're under Russia in this deal. Okay, this deal favors the United States and Russia. Frozen European funds will be unfrozen. The remaining frozen Russian funds will be invested in a separate U.S.-Russia investment vehicle, which will implement joint projects in specific areas. This fund will be aimed at strengthening relations and expanding common interests to create a strong incentive not to return to conflict. This plan that I'm reading, guys, smells and reeks of Kirill Dmitriev's hands all over it. 100%. I mean, this is all about economy, what we each can get out of it. It comes from a win-win mentality from Kirill Dmitriev. Trump doesn't really operate on that mentality. But this is kind of like how this is operating. A joint U.S.-Russian working group on security issues will be established to promote and ensure implementation of all provisions. Russia will enshrine in law its non-aggression policy towards Europe and Ukraine. The U.S. and Russia will agree to extend nuclear non-proliferation and arms control treaties, including START 1. So remember the START treaties, like they're basically going to go back to that. Ukraine's not going to be a nuclear state. I guess. It just, a lot of these laws just never hold, you know what I mean? So for me, it's kind of like, So the Zaporozhye nuclear power plant will be restarted under the IAEA supervision, and it will share, the electricity will be shared between Russia and Ukraine equally. Both countries will be committed to implementing educational programs and aimed at understanding tolerance of different cultures and eliminating racism and prejudice. We'll see how Russia does with that. Ukraine will adopt EU rules on religious tolerance and the protection of linguistic minorities. That's because Ukraine blocked a lot of Russian ethnic speaking people and their language. Both countries will agree to abolish all discriminatory measures and guarantee the rights of Ukrainian and Russian media and education. All Nazi ideology and activity must be rejected and prohibited. This is interesting because this is where they can align, because Israel, of the whole Israel. So what does that mean, right? What could that effectively mean for Russia? So 21 territories, Crimea, Lugansk, Donetsk, all will be recognized as de facto Russian, including by the United States. Kherson, Zaporozhye will be frozen along the lines of contact, which means de facto recognition along the line of contact. This is interesting because this is something that Russia would be giving up, that I think a lot of hardcore Russian nationalists and military specifically would not want to give up because they've already had it. And so this would be something that Russia would be giving up that I think a lot of people will contest. Russia will give up other agreed territories that it controls outside the 5 regions. So again, this is something that will be contested. It's already being contested by a lot of the military in Russia. Ukrainian forces will withdraw from the part of Donetsk Oblast they currently control, and this withdrawal zone will be considered a neutral, demilitarized buffer zone and internationally recognized as belonging to the Russian Federation. Russian forces will not enter this demilitarized zone. So again, it's kind of like in Iraq, you have the US zone and then you have the Iraqi zone. The US is green. The rest is Iraqi controlled. So it's kind of like that. After agreeing on future territorial agreements, both the Russian Federation and Ukraine undertake not to change these agreements by force. Any security guarantees will not apply if this commitment is violated. Russia will not impede Ukraine's use of the Dnieper River for commercial activity, and agreements will be reached on the free transportation of grain through the Black Sea. So again, the corridor, Black Sea grain corridor, must be protected. A humanitarian committee will be established to resolve outstanding issues. All remaining prisoners and bodies will be exchanged on an all-for-all basis. All civilian detainees and hostages will be returned, including children. A family reunification program will be implemented. Measures will be taken to alleviate suffering of the victims. Ukraine will hold elections in 100 days. This is Zelensky's out. This is what's going to happen. Zelensky is done. This effectively means Zelensky will be removed, I think. I don't think he's going to be the guy that they're going to stay with if this happens. All parties involved in the conflict will receive full amnesty for their actions during the war and agree not to pursue claims or consider further grievances. This agreement will be legally binding. Its implementation will be monitored and guaranteed by a peace council chaired by President Trump. Again, so Donald Trump would get to be, once again, the peace chair, the guy that's bringing peace to the world, the peace president. There you go. Once all parties agree to this memorandum, the ceasefire will take effect immediately after both sides withdraw to agreed upon points to begin implementing the agreement. So, a lot of people had different reactions to that. This was reported on Axios. So it's been reported all over. Yeah, it's reported all over the media now. Now,
is there a date?
Russia, it's literally like the 18th of November.
Oh shit!
Literally, as this was happening. Yeah. So. Yeah. It was like, yeah. So this news came out. The first article I showed, the 18th of November. Now the 21st of November. Let's look at the Russian angle. Says a little bit something different, right? So this is from TASS, the Russian news agency. Russia says that the U.S. still to discuss in detail Washington's peace plan on Ukraine. This is coming from the Kremlin. Dmitry Peskov said that nothing is being discussed in detail at the moment. Notice the word in detail. Moscow and Washington have not discussed in detail particular aspects of the American side regarding the Ukrainian conflict settlement plan. Russian presidential spokesman Dmitry Peskov said today. They're 8 hours ahead. So there are certain provisions on behalf of the American side regarding the peace plan, but nothing is being discussed in detail at the moment. So it seems like he's hesitant to talk about, what has been discussed already, because something has been discussed, but he's saying it's not been discussed in detail. The contents of the U.S. plan leaked to Western media require the U.S. and other countries to recognize Russia's sovereignty over Crimea, Donbass, and other territories. We talked about this. We just went over this. So this is the plan. They know about it, but they say they haven't discussed it in detail. So what does that mean? I mean, it means there's a plan, but Russia's saying they don't know the details. But I suspect that that's going to happen in the next few days, that they are going to discuss this and they'll either say yay or nay on certain provisions there. I think the most contested will be the territories that Russia would have to give up. They've already attained, because Russia already attacked Kiev. I mean, they're already there. So it's kind of like, that would actually require them giving in. But again, there's a difference between the Russian military and the Kremlin. They have different thoughts and points of views. Like the Kremlin wants to basically establish relationships, do all of this. Kirill Dmitriev is out there trying to, talk about ending this. Whereas the military patriots, they're like, why would we negotiate with Trump? Like, why would you even take anything that they're saying to consideration? Like, what is this about? There's a lot of angry people that are upset that Russia's even talking to the United States, that they're even considering what they're saying, based on the fact that the United States and Washington and NATO have been entirely deceptive many times, that have tricked Russia into kicking the football many times, only to pull it away. And so they don't trust anything coming from the West, especially coming from the likes of the Trump administration. They see them as equal. So there is some contention there. But ultimately, the decision does lie with the commander of the armed forces, doesn't it? And that is Vladimir Putin. And so whatever Putin decides is what's going to happen. So we'll see what happens with that. I do think that because Kirill Dmitriev put this out there himself, that there is some legitimacy to the plan. I think a lot of people who are upset at this from the Russian side are saying that it's bullshit, blah, 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 that Russia would never do that. But he wouldn't put it out there like that if it wasn't something that didn't have potential, because he's somebody high up. And even though he doesn't have the ultimate decision to make, he's in Putin's ear. So you have to think about that.
When do you think they're pushing to get this done by? Like, is this like full court pressure right now for this? Or, I did hear something that Russia is making plans to go closer to Kiev because now they're just encroaching at this point.
Yeah. So again, the military is going to continue doing their thing. I mean, you know what I mean? Like until something is concrete, they're not going to stop. Like, this doesn't mean that the attacks are going to stop from either end until something is like set in stone. So I think next year, I think is what I highly doubt. I mean, things will happen that quickly, but it could. I mean, December isn't really as important for Russia as it is for the Western world, right? Russians celebrate Christmas on January 7th. So it would have to be after that, probably, that anything really concrete happens. Or they could say, we're just going to end this now. I doubt things will move that quickly, to be honest, because these things take time. So from the Ukrainian perspective, and RT posted this, how Ukraine needs to choose between losing a key ally or losing dignity, agreeing to the U.S. proposal. So Vladimir Zelensky has said that Ukraine must brace for a tough choice between accepting the 28 difficult points received from the U.S. or risk losing a key backer. His comments come after the submission of a proposal and a leaking of its purported text by Ukrainian MP. According to Reuters, The administration of US President Donald Trump has threatened to cut off Ukraine from intelligence and military aid should Kiev reject it. Now, I don't know if that is confirmed, but that's what was said by Reuters. Now, if that is true, and the United States will cut off Ukraine, I think that Trump is serious about that, and I think they would cut it off, not because they care about really Russia, but because they've made some sort of negotiation, and and Trump needs to see this through. Like, Trump is on a roll here. You know, he's bringing peace to the Middle East. Now he'll bring peace to Europe. Like, come on, this is an ego-driven guy. This is the whole thing, right? But this is also not just him. This is a deep state wanting to promote this idea right now. And I think a lot of people have been stuck into this, conflict being like Russia defending the world against, all of the hegemony. And I think to a degree they were, in terms of defending their own national interests, their own borders, their own culture, their own, people, essentially. And it was existential for them. It is actually still existential for them. But they're doing it because, notice, they went in not in 2014, but in 2022. And they were criticized for that. And people were asking, why did they wait so long? And the truth is they weren't ready to go in before. It would have been too risky for them. If it was an ideological fight, they would have gone in right then and there when it happened, when they were killing Russians. But they didn't. They waited until it was tactically and strategically the right moment to go in. And that's how they operate. So I think a lot of people need to understand their moves. And I mean, the way I'm looking at what Zelensky is saying is like, this has been difficult. This is going to be hard. It's going to be a hard winter. We're entering like winter in Russia and Ukraine and that area, and it's extremely brutal. It gets really cold. This is like a time now, make or break. Like, either they give in, because Russia is expanding. Russia's in Kiev. Russia's, that there's no way to put this. Ukraine is pretty much, it's been falling apart, but now it's probably at its lowest point. So militarily, this is not convenient for them anyway. So this is probably a good deal. It's kind of like you're a criminal and you're sitting there. Are you going to take the deal where it's like 5 years, or are you going to risk, winning it all, but really you don't have a chance, or losing it and getting 20 years to life, right? So you have to make that decision and say, okay, like, we're going to give in. And I think this is probably the lowest I've seen Zelensky, the with the least amount of anything on his sleeve. So yeah, I think this is where we're headed. I think this is where we're going to go. I don't know, Fem, what do you think?
Well, the one point I do want to make real quickly is that I don't think necessarily that they were going in tactically into Ukraine. I think they exhausted every single type of possibility or thing they could have. Like, they had Minsk 1, then Minsk 2.
Yeah.
Everything was exhausted. I think at the point where they saw the bombing increase during a ceasefire, knowing that the Ukrainians that were Russian speaking, ethnic speaking, were going to be slaughtered, they had no choice. So I think they exhausted every single avenue. And that's why they had to go in.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, an ideological state would have seen its people getting killed and would have gone in or done something if the rules weren't respected right away. And they're not. They stood by, they thought it through. They're like, okay, well, let's try this. Let's try that. Like, let's and that's good in a way, like that they operate like this. But it also, the criticism was like, people died. 14,000 people died during that time. And now when you're putting out this plan, there's not really going to be repercussions for Ukraine in this deal if that goes through. And, and they're going to have to give up some territories. So while it does favor Russia because Russia is effectively winning, it's not spelled out as an outright recognition of Russia's victory. Of course, it will never be spelled out that way from the West. It absolutely will not. That's never going to happen, because they would have to admit they lost, and they screwed themselves over for this. So, but I do think that it's something, the way that plan is laid out, it does look like it's something formulated by somebody that's very economically minded, because the entire thing is basically about economics and diplomacy and, making sure that agreements go through. Russia returns to the G8. Remember, Putin did want to be a part of NATO at one point, several
Yeah.
points, twice. So this is not surprising, but it's just, I think, again, when you put people on a pedestal, when you put, countries, nation states on a pedestal, and they operate like nation states, you're going to have disappointments. So I think it'll be interesting to see how the military responds to this, how a lot of like Russian, hardcore nationalists respond to this, and how, if this goes through, what Russia will confirm. But they've already said, like, we don't want to, anything that happens between Russia and the United States and Ukraine, they don't want to put on a megaphone. They said, we don't want to put all this on a megaphone. Any deals that we have are not going to be placed on a megaphone. But the reality is that Kirill Dmitriev is literally out there putting things on a megaphone. So, pick one. Like, what, they might be trying to subdue it a little bit, but this guy's out there, posting all the stuff. And I think Russia doesn't do that. They don't just put people out there if they don't want them to say things. So
yeah. Well, guys, that's it for today. It's like 2:25, and we have a hard out. I did my section yesterday on the homeless left, and I've talked about it in a couple of the shows. Talked about it on the Drive Time show, and I talked about it on Monday here too as well. You want to look up Trump's new memorandum? It's kind of crazy. It's an equivalent to what Biden had proposed during the January 6th, which was the labeling designation of terrorism. This is NSPM 7, an executive order. It's not really an executive order. It is a memorandum. Let's play this quick video really quickly. It does include Hassan Piker in it. And once again, I'm not really in agreement with Hassan Piker on a lot of things. And even on this situation, his language he used during January 6th, he didn't necessarily give the green light for more security state treatment, but he kind of used the same language, which justified it in certain ways. Take a look at this. This is from Hotspot.
In national headlines, President Trump signed an executive order Thursday targeting domestic terrorism networks and organized political violence. Trump saying the order will work to tackle, quote, anarchists from the left and the groups funding them.
That doesn't sound like much, does it? Just the president signing an executive order to fight against a local problem. Or is it? Because when you take even a cursory look at National Security Presidential Memorandum 7, or NSPM 7 as they're calling it in Washington, a lot of things with a lot of far-reaching implications start to jump off the page at you. The first is that this is possibly the biggest internal power grab we have witnessed by a US president in our lifetime. Typically, when the empire's presidents wish to wield unconstitutional power, they couch it in layers of bureaucracy and legalese that would give you a headache trying to figure it out. Not Trump. With a stroke of his pen, he has not only effectively declared war on any domestic institutions, organizations, or individuals that fundamentally oppose his agenda, but he has also effectively criminalized them through the back door by creating incredibly vague definitions for what a terrorist is now. Domestic terrorism, according to NSPM 7, now includes expressing support for ideas like anti-Americanism, anti-capitalism, anti-Christianity, support for the overthrow of the United States government, extremism on migration, extremism on race, extremism on gender, hostility toward those who hold traditional American views on family, hostility to those who hold traditional American views on religion, and hostility to those who hold traditional American views on morality. Do you see the problem here? Does being a vocal trade unionist, for example, qualify someone as an anti-capitalist, which would then make them a terrorist under the wording of this executive order? And what are the thresholds for any of these things that would make them constitute domestic terrorism? Apparently nobody knows.
There isn't a lot of appetite for this kind of thing. There isn't a lot of appetite for this kind of like mass apprehension, right? But the goal is to manufacture some kind of consent for the federal government to start apprehending and arresting anyone and everyone that has remotely demonstrated empathy at any point. This tactic sounds familiar if you are aware of how America's allies have worked, or puppet states, dictatorships, fascist forms of governance all around the world that we've aligned with. We have done this everywhere else. It's called the Jakarta method for a reason. It was first implemented in Jakarta. Now we are turning that same scrutiny and same principled authoritarian fascist technique to the domestic front. Fascism is colonialism turned inward, and this is fascism.
NSPM 7 is actually a full frontal attack on the US First Amendment, and it's an important sign that we are at this stage of imperial collapse, where the empire has lost the ability to pretend to uphold certain ideals and is now retreating full speed into regular old fascism. We're long past imperial boomerang now. We're at the part of the story where the empire is building large detention camps and preparing to turn itself into the exact fascist police state that it has spent decades creating in other people's countries. It's now deploying surveillance equipment recently tested on Palestinians on its own streets. And most interestingly of all, the open-ended wording of these newfangled terrorism offenses makes it such that predictive policing has effectively become a reality. So now if you live in the imperial core, you're about to witness Minority Report happen in real life. No First Amendment, no checks and balances, just an angry, naked emperor pushing every button available to him. Welcome to the reality that the rest of us have always lived in.
Now, if you go to the Charity and Security Network and you go to Section 2, Jayme, I just want to read the first line of the Section 2. If you can get that up. It says the memorandum appoints the National Joint Terrorism Task Force, which is called the JTTF. And I think that started under Biden. When he created what was called the National Strategy for Countering Domestic Terrorism. We talked about that, how it said that anybody was anti-abortion. Pretty much it criminalized all the people on the right. If you didn't believe in climate change, if you were anti-environmentalism, right? Like all this stuff, it characterized all the enemies of the left at that time, because Biden was in point. But that was just a categorizing of this. Why? Let me read this sentence one more time. And its local officials, the memorandum appoints the National Joint Terrorism Task Force and its local offices to coordinate and supervise a comprehensive national strategy to carry out the memorandum's goals. It directs the JTTF, which is the National Joint Terrorism Task Force, to investigate potential federal crimes relating to acts of recruiting or radicalizing persons to engage in political violence, terrorism, or conspiracy, or violent deprivation of any citizen's rights. So, I mean, you can just see, potential is the key word, and ask them to disrupt what's going on. So this is Minority Report, in fact. And the thing that's bothering me right now is, once again, I can't hold Hassan Piker completely accountable, but he was using a lot of that language with the J6ers, defining them as terrorism and political violence and whatnot. He didn't speak out so much freely about, and same thing with Ken Klippenstein, who's been doing a lot of stuff when it comes to this shit over here. Those are the two prominent voices on the left. Ronnie Kalick and Eugene did something on this too as well. All these voices are saying stuff right now because now their side is being targeted, right?
Yeah.
He said anti-capitalist, anti-Christian, right? Now they're going after anybody who's enemies of the rights ideology. And that's what they're going to do. They're going to play political football with us, right? They'll take these powers, and when each side has if they're in power, they'll use them against the other one. So this is just the next step. And they'll end up arresting a lot of left-wingers who are involved in a lot of stuff, or detaining them now and holding them there, just the same way they held the J6ers. And the conservatives will be fine with it, and they'll be okay with it because it's not their ideology. And it's almost the same thing the left was okay with, man. They were okay because when they were jailing these people, they were seditionists who were trying to overthrow the government, who were racist, who were misogynist, and it's okay to do that, right? It was a virtue signal to the highest degree. So now you have the other side going on, and it's just doing the same. And this is when it talks about being principled. We were screaming about that bill. It came out after January 6th. We did a whole show on it and broke it down. And we were like, this is wrong. This is wrong. You got to be principled. You have to be consistent. Free speech absolutist. This speech is protected under the First Amendment. Plain and simple. You want to be an anti-environmentalist? You don't want to believe in climate change? Go right ahead. You're allowed to. You want to be anti-abortion? You believe that abortion's bad, whatnot? Go ahead. If you want to be anti-capitalist, anti-Christian, it's protected by the First Amendment. And that's the thing that's just crazy right now. We have hit the next level. This isn't Donald Trump putting the final nail in the coffin, fam. That final nail is already in the coffin. This is him throwing a stick a dynamite through the hole in the coffin that's already nailed shut and blowing you up inside. It is over. Minority Report is here. Your civil liberties are gone. They're going to jail any of their oppositions at any time, both sides, and they'll both go along with it and agree with it because they both now have the power.
Yeah, I mean, this all started, as you said, back a long time ago. Each administration bans something, puts it into law, then so on and so forth. And now it's just, and make no mistake that these people, including Hassan Piker, will stand right there against the right once their rights are trampled on. And the right will then come back and do the same thing and so on and so forth, because there is no consistency with these people. Now that Donald Trump is the president, though, it's okay to talk about these issues. But if it was, you know, a liberal as president, they wouldn't be talking about this stuff, guys. So you have to remember that a lot of it is, you know, I would say opportunism, but it's bad regardless, you know, regardless of who's in power, and it's all being done by the same people anyway. So that's it.
Yeah. That's it for the show, guys. We had a heart out. Thank you so much for watching. All the links down below to help us out for Craig Pasta Jardula, Fiorella Isabel, and Jayme CheeseSlice on the ones and twos. Happy Thanksgiving, you turkey heads, you gobbleheads. This is the Truth Wire. Truth out.
It's in like 6 days, but okay.